Right, so hello everybody, I'm Nigel Hicks and welcome to my photography talk this evening. I'm going to be talking about winter photography, what you can do during the winter months. It's always a bit of a temptation really to put the camera away when the winter months come along because the days are so short. Of course, it's also so darn cold as well that sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge to actually go out and do the photography that is beckoning. But it's really a mistake to put the camera away. It's actually a great season to actually go out and do some shooting, provided you can wrap yourself up warm and provided you can actually provided you actually get some reasonable weather of one sort or another. Obviously, that can include stormy weather as well as nice, calm, balmy days. And obviously, the stormy weather is what you're more likely to get in the weather, but not necessarily. But you can get some really dramatic days, such as in this shot here, a sunset taken just on the beach in front of Durdle Door, and you get some very dramatic skies, which just make some stupendous, terrific photography. And of course, being winter as well, the sun is setting a long way to the south, well down to the southwest, and so that it's setting in a very different position from what you would have in the summer. So, for example, this view here, you see the sun setting just over Portland on the Dorset coast. If we were in the middle of summer, the sun would be setting way over to the right of the picture behind these cliffs, and so it wouldn't be anything like as effective. So, quite a different kind of shot that you can get in the winter months compared to the summer. A very different kind of light, and a tendency to, or the opportunity to get some very dramatic and very effective lighting. The problem you have, of course, is that the really good days can be few and far between, and you have to grab your opportunities as and when you can. Dull grey days or wet and windy, really rainy days often are not terrific for photography, but other times the photography conditions can be absolutely stupendous and absolutely spot on. And I'm going to try and show you a few examples of that today, and hopefully inspire you to keep your camera working and get yourself out there regardless of the winter weather. So the first thing to bear in mind is that the sun's angle is really low in the sky, of course, during much of the winter, and that enables you to be able to keep doing landscape photography all the way through the day. There's really no point, no time during the day in winter when the sun is too high for decent landscape photography. So you have some really nice golden sunlight all the way through from sunrise through to sunset. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that even sunrise is at quite a civilized hour in the morning during the winter, so you don't have to get out of bed at some ungodly hour unless you're intending to drive a long way, of course. But generally speaking, sunrise is at quite a civilized hour in the winter, so you can get some decent sunrise photography. And sunset is actually, well, sometimes rather just too early sometimes, but it is actually, again, a very civilized hour. You don't have to stay out particularly late to get some really great sunset photography when you do have a clear sky. And this kind of situation here is Barrowman's Nose on Dartmoor, this incredible granite outcrop with the sun setting just over to the right here, taken sort of late afternoon, what would normally be late afternoon anyway, so before 5 o'clock, with the sun just about to go down behind the rocks up on this tor and around the Barrowman's Nose. Similar kind of thing. This is actually sunrise on Lanyon Quoit, which is the remains of an ancient burial mound near Penzance in the far west of Cornwall. And there's also actually, you might notice, there's actually frost on the ground, which in West Cornwall is practically unheard of, but it's a frosty morning. Not that I've made a thing of that, it really is a shot about the sunrise. Yet another sunrise on this 3,000 year old monument. So how many sunrises has this monument seen is what I'm trying to say in this picture. But really just sunrise at a very civilized hour of the day, about 7:30, probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, actually, come to think of it. Maybe even later than that, just coming over the horizon and shooting it in very much a backlit sort of way. Not exactly a silhouette, you can still see details in the rock, but a really atmospheric, moody backlit shot. Just a great sort of sunrise kind of shot. With just winter is a really good time for this kind of sunrise photography. On those days when you get the clear weather, of course, that is. And then still low sun angle is also really very good for silhouetting of skeletal trees. This is a pollarded willow on the Somerset levels in Somerset, of course, and really very good sort of subject matter for winter days when you can really see these beautiful silhouetted skeletal trees. Just a sort of very atmospheric condition, absolutely cloudless sky, which is the sort of thing you often have on really calm, clear days. And it's been winter, not even a single cloud in the sky. It actually makes the sky quite boring, I have to say. But if you can fill it with a really nice and really strong subject here, just with the sun immediately behind the tree, and I'm standing in the shadow created by the tree, so I'm getting a nice starburst with the sun coming shining from behind it. And then frost. Living in South Devon, I don't actually get to see frost all that often. I have to make a trip up to Dartmoor usually if I want to see frost in this part of the world. But this one is shot in Dorset, which does get quite a bit of frost. And also you can see some flooding along. This is on a sort of a riverside meadow, so there's quite a bit of flooding from the nearby river. And that helps to sort of contribute to the frost as well in many ways, and it contribute in many ways to sort of the atmospheric wintry view. So frost is always a nice thing, especially mixing with water early in the morning, not too long after sunrise. Of course, contributing or combined with the water, especially on a really calm, clear winter's day like this, is early morning mist. And there's not a whole lot of mist here, but you can see mist hanging around in the trees and just coming in off the flooded field. And this is the sort of thing that you can really capture if you're out early enough. It's just this early morning mist, just very low lying in among the trees and just hovering above the water. Obviously, if you're standing in among it, it's difficult to actually get a view of it. So very often you end up standing outside an area of mist and then shooting across it. If you're shooting into the sunlight, then you can have that mist really lit up beautifully as a white veil. If you're shooting with the lights, then it's a rather different kind of atmosphere as it is in this shot. Actually, I'm shooting into the light with this one, but there's actually just a little bit of light mist in among the trees. Another one to show up nice skeletal trees in the winter against the sort of very early morning light. Obviously, with the mist, generally speaking, even in winter, the mist will start to burn off once the sun is up, certainly in the south of England. On really cold days, then sometimes that mist will linger practically all day. So in which case you can then afford to take your time to actually shoot the mist in the water, but above the water and above the wet fields. But normally it burns off within an hour or so of sun coming up during the winter. So you don't always get that extra amount of time in which to shoot that mist. That's to be there as soon as it gets light, and then you can shoot it before the sun comes up, and then as soon as the sun is above the horizon, it's shining through the mist. Then we talk about really fog, not just mist, and this is really a bank of fog swirling across the Holden Hills in South Devon, and really atmospheric, really very moody. Not the sort of thing you see all that often, but when you do, my goodness, it's really very effective. Just swirling across the hills and through the fields, just really just picking out silhouettes really of those trees that are standing above most of the fog, and then just really showing the smooth curves of the hills among that fog. An almost completely monochromatic scene, although this is actually a colour image, believe it or not. Actually, you can see down in the bottom right here, there is a bit of colour there. But essentially, it's really very much a monochromatic scene, which is typical of really quite foggy days. Then on clearer days, may not be necessarily all that sunny, such as this. The light is quite plain, you might say. It's sort of soft, gentle sunlight. It can be very desolate and very wintry, you might say, very desolate and very cold on such wintry days. But also, if you're in certain sort of rural locations here in a marsh, then sort of dead reeds and so on, dead grasses too, can produce some beautiful golden colours in the right kind of light, and it can give you a very different sort of aspect on what is otherwise quite a famous location. This, of course, is Glastonbury Tor, and it's photographed from the Ham Wall Nature Reserve, which is one of the Avalon reserves on the Somerset levels just west of Glastonbury, a sort of series of marshy water-filled nature reserves, which are fantastic for bird life, particularly in the winter. And also, obviously, you've got these fantastic rich brown, golden colours across the marshy areas as well, which form and really quite a nice foreground to actually then show off Glastonbury Tor in the background. And obviously here, Glastonbury Tor really is just setting the scene, just giving you the context. The main subject of the photography is really these reeds in the foreground here. And it's making it quite clear where it is. And I think everybody would know what this view is of here, with the Glastonbury Tor in the background. Then if you've got bright, really bright, strong sunshine, then both the dead trees and the reeds around a lake can really have this really strong sort of brown and golden sort of colour. It really can be very effective. Actually, you know, obviously a very different view from what you would have in summer, where everything would be an intense green. Instead, we have this really golden russet colour set against the deep blue of the lake. And this is so very atmospheric, a very different kind of shot entirely. So it's really worth visiting these places, both in summer and winter, to get very different views. In fact, in many ways, this is more attractive than the summer view, I have to say. And of course, with the sun really low as well, that really helps to emphasize and enhance that golden colour in the vegetation here. This is actually Slapton Lee down at Slapton on the south coast of Devon. And this is very much how it looks throughout most of the winter. Slightly different shot, but similar kind of idea. This is Canada Lake in Shapwick Heath, which is another of the Avalon marshes near Glastonbury. And just a really calm, clear day with some perfect reflections in the lake. And then just the line of the lake and the line of the shore, perhaps I should say, leading one's eye through the lake, along the lake into the distance, to actually really give us the illusion of 3 dimensions. A little bit messy over here, but this also actually helps to set the scene and give the context of this marshy, watery environment. But really what makes this picture here is not just the beautiful brown and golden colours, but also really calm mirror-like water and giving these perfect reflections. Cold weather, but really not actually as cold as you might imagine it to be. As you can see, there's no real frost here. It's taken in the middle of the day, so the sun is as high as it's going to be, but still pretty low and giving us some nice golden sunlight. This is actually taken from a bird hide which has been built on the shore of this lake. I've been told that since I took this picture, the hide has been rebuilt and now is not the tumble down shack that it was when I went to photograph this view, but it's now quite a nice little building. But I haven't been there to check it out since to see if that's actually true. But you might actually be able to photograph this view now in some reasonable comfort, sheltered from any of the elements. Now, something that's really quite different. The night sky. The night sky can often be really bright in winter. You just have to be able to put up with the cold, which is always a bit of an issue, of course. But this one is taken with actually fog on the water. It's taken at the mouth of the River Otter at Budley Salterton, and although there's generally speaking not much fog in the general environment, there is fog over the water of the river estuary, and I find it's actually made it really quite atmospheric. It's partially blocking out the stars that I can see here, but much of it is really clear, and I find this whole picture really atmospheric, much more atmospheric than the other shots that I've taken here on a very clear evening. Or clear in the sense of no fog anyway, but I find this picture, I find it very atmospheric and very moving. I like it quite a lot, way more so than my shots where there isn't any fog. In terms of the actual photography here, what it shows is the stars rotating around the pole star, which the pole star is right just there. You can see it's actually just a spot. It's the one and only star in the sky that's not moving, and everything is actually rotating on moving the pointer in the wrong direction, where the stars are rotating anti-clockwise around the pole star. And you can see that this is quite a long exposure by the star trails I created. It's about a 30-minute exposure or thereabouts, and that's giving us these nice lines. Obviously, if I were to expose for longer, say to 45 minutes or even an hour, then these lines would become much longer and they would actually start to join up, and then you would really have a very strong set of circles going around the pole star. The danger then is actually if you've got any light pollution coming from anywhere, in the scene. We actually do have a little bit here from a house down here, which is hidden in the fog. Then actually, within an hour's exposure, that might actually start to overexpose unbelievably. But at this time of this exposure time, half an hour, has given us quite interesting lighting in the landscape and long enough star trails in the sky to actually start to make sense to the atmospheric picture. Another thing to bear in mind in the winter is that wildlife is still around, so there's still good wildlife photography to be done. Obviously, quite a few mammals have gone and hidden themselves away for the winter, though not all of them by a long way, but birds are still pretty plentiful, starting with small tits and robins and so on your garden feeders. They can be fun to photograph and good for practicing photography of birds as well, in the comfort of your home, close to a bird feeder. Or if you go out further afield, you have shots like this one. This is a kestrel on the cliffs at Batalac in the far west of Cornwall. Really nice day, and it's quite sunny, but it was fairly cold by West Cornwall standards anyway. And the kestrels are really active. The Batalac cliffs in the far west of Cornwall are really great places for photographing kestrels. There's quite a few out that way, and they're regularly seen, and we could be quite readily photographed. Otherwise, we have sort of good telephoto lenses, of course. And this one's shot or visible against the backdrop of the cliff, or one of the cliffs at Batalac. The other thing that, in terms of bird wildlife, is migratory waders. We have especially in the southwest, we have tens of thousands, other parts of Britain too, like East Anglia as well. Tens or hundreds of thousands of migratory waders come down from the northern parts, from Siberia and Iceland and so on, to make our river estuaries and freshwater lakes and marshes their winter home. So they can be some really very good photography during the winter months. And this is a group of curlews photographed on the estuary of the River Team, not very far from my home, just about half a mile from where I live. And well, curlews are, it has to be said, they're actually notoriously difficult to get close enough to photograph. They're quite a shy bird and very observant, very quick to spot someone approaching. So these are actually photographed using my portable hide, which I set up on the shore at low tide on the estuary, and in a certain cove in the estuary, and I wait for the tide to come up and push the birds towards me. And they were still pretty nervous that the hide wouldn't come quite as close as I'd hoped, but they certainly came close enough for some decent and fairly worthwhile photography. I just see from this little group of curlews. So this is the kind of thing that you can do without a hide, or you can either go to some of the permanent setup hides that you have around a number of the estuaries and freshwater marshes, not just in the southwest, but all over Britain these days. And it can be very good spots for bird photography. And also, even for certain species, you can actually stalk and just walk along the river estuary very carefully and get some decent shots, such as the little egrets and herons and some of the ducks you can actually get reasonably close to for photography, what just handheld just as you're walking along the shore. Okay, so we're going to move on to something slightly different. I've already shown you some rather watery pictures, but I'm really going to concentrate on sort of the watery landscape now as the sort of the main feature of the photography. So starting off with this simple shot, really very calm early morning. This is fantastic sky. That's one of the things about winter, is just these big open skies, especially on a calm, quiet day when the sky really clears. And this is taken in the at high tide in the mouth of the River Parrett on the Somerset levels. And on the right, we have the river itself, really very high, coming up to this bank. And on the left-hand side of the bank, we have the Sturt Marshes, which is a vast wetland area, which has been deliberately created as a bit of a flood control for the River Parrett, which normally floods, most winters, floods large areas of the Somerset levels, and does in quite a few houses. But in the last 10 years, they've actually deliberately flooded this area very close to the mouth of the river, and that helps to actually alleviate the flooding further upstream. And now this area called the Sturt Marshes is a vast area for overwintering migratory birds, particularly waders and so on. But being such a vast area, it's actually quite difficult to get close to the birds. But nevertheless, it is a great spot for some very atmospheric landscape photography. of a very watery, wet landscape, especially if you're there at high tide. If they're at low tide, it tends to be a very wet and muddy landscape, which is not quite so photogenic, but the watery landscapes at high tide are really quite fantastic. Now we come to something which is really, again, back to fog again, and also sort of the very, very graphic shapes. In this instance, a slowly disintegrating wreck on the estuary of the River Exe, taken in December one day, again on another very calm day, with fog to actually soften the sunlight and really remove any background detail as well. So we really just have the shape of this wreck and just absolutely no other detail competing for attention. We have a little bit of sunlight shining through the fog, so we've got some shadows here shining through the woodwork of the wreck. But it's this very sort of dynamic triangular shape of the wreck, which is what dominates the frame, of course, and which is absolutely not only the main subject, but the only subject in this image, coupled with its reflection in the water. Taken just a few yards away is this, something a little bit different, just the rotting remains of an old harbour, an old jetty on the shore of the River Exe, again with the fog still there, on a very calm morning with the tide coming up, just shooting into the light, so everything is silhouetted. It's all, again, as with that foggy hill shot, it's almost completely monochromatic. It is a colour shot image, but it is almost completely monochromatic, just because we've simplified everything right down to just a very simple silhouettes, and then just the water in the background, and just a little bit of slightly busy silhouette, but everything else is really very simple and nothing else competing for attention, just as V with these posts. I know I've shown this picture before, but that was quite some time ago, and I love this picture, so I never get tired of showing it off. I'm never too sure whether anybody else likes it, but I do, so I just play people with it and just show it off quite regularly. And another shot that I have shown you before is the metallic tin mines in the far west of Cornwall. After I finished photographing those kestrels that I showed you just now, then come the dusk and photographing the mines. So this is actually after the sun has gone down below the horizon, and it's about a 30-second exposure. So the sea, it's quite not exactly a stormy day, but there's a lot of swell coming in. So with a long exposure, the water is completely blurred out, and we really have this beautiful silky effect, rather ethereal effect of the waves crashing on the rocks. And this is one of the great things about photographing the sea in the winter. It's much more restless, especially along the West Cornwall coast and the North Devon coast as well. It's a really quite restless, and there's a lot of energy in that winter sea as it rolls in on the cliffs and on the beaches as well. So you have some very dynamic, very powerful images, much more so than you're likely to have in summer, when the water is a little bit limp and rather calm most of the time, and not really giving you that energy and that power that you see during the winter months, or even just a fairly average day. But going to the other extreme, we really have a really slow, long exposure time after the sun has set, well, after sort of about half an hour after the sun has gone below the horizon, shooting before the sun has gone down below the horizon when it's still shining, using a powerful telephoto lens, or about reasonably powerful, about 300mm, and homing in on the surface using a really fast shutter speed, maybe about a 500th or a 1000th of a second, really homing in on the waves as they crash in on the rocks, and just really giving the sense of energy and power of that surf, with the spray flying in the air. These waves are moving quite fast. It's not as fast as, say, as a waterfall or a fast moving river, but they're moving at quite a speed. So to really freeze the movement of these water droplets in the air, you do need quite a fast shutter speed. And to show them up effectively, you need quite a strong telephoto lens to really get in there among all that water, among all that foam and surf, to really catch those droplets as they're jumping up in the air. A little bit blurred there, which indicates that even at 500th of a second, it's not quite, the shutter speed is not quite as fast as perhaps it should be to actually really, really freeze the movement of the droplets. But for most of the picture, you can see the droplets have been frozen quite reasonably well, and it really gives you the sense of energy and power of this wave as it comes in on the rocks, on the cliffs at Metallic. That's a good powerful, energetic shot of surf coming onto shore, a good winter shot. Similarly, on the north coast of Devon at Heartland, some really powerful pictures of big surf coming in on the waves. This time, well, again, using a telephoto lens and a very fast shutter speed to freeze the movement of the wave. This time I'm shooting into the sunlight, and because the wind is offshore, I'm helped by the fact that the spray is being picked up by the wind and being lifted off the tops of the waves. And then we have this beautiful spray coming up, being picked up and lit up by the backlighting sun. So this is the kind of shot that you can get on this kind of day when the wind is offshore, the waves are big, and the sun is getting low over the horizon, out over the sea, and it's backlighting this spray as it picked up over the tops of the waves. And so it gives you really the sense of energy and power as it thunders in onto these rocks. They've taken really just a few minutes before sunset, so the sun is really low in the horizon, on the horizon. And just the rocks and cliffs themselves are just silhouetted, so there's no competition for detail. A little bit of detail down here in the bottom right, but really not competing for attention. It's really very much the tops of this wave here, and the spray that's being picked up, kicked up by the wind, and then lit up by the backlighting sun. And then inevitably, I'm going to talk about snow. Living in South Devon, don't get to see much of this white stuff either. Again, I usually have to make a trip up to Dartmoor to get to see much of it, or sometimes to make a trip up to Somerset, which also sees a lot more snow than South Devon does. So this is a photograph of the village of Blagden in Somerset, shot just above Blagden Lake, Blagden Reservoir, which is the reservoir that feeds water to Bristol. And just a really nice wintry, snowy picture. It's almost the sort of thing you'd see on a Christmas card, which I haven't actually done as yet. I've never got around to putting it on a Christmas card. Perhaps I should do that. Normally, as any of you who've come on my photography courses will know, normally I sort of shun flat, dull, grey skies like this. But on a snowy day, they're kind of appropriate, and they actually merge rather well with the snowy landscape in the distance, really give you the sense of foreboding and feeling really also, of course, that it's really very cold, which is the sort of the atmosphere that you want to put over on a snowy day. A slightly busy image in terms of the composition here, but the overall atmosphere, I think, makes up for that and just really shows up as a nice snowy landscape. Something rather simpler in terms of composition, and the sort of thing that a lot of people are actually more likely to see from me is one with strong diagonals, just looking along a road. As I say, it's a very simple composition, just really just concentrating on looking along the road, and the road leading the eye into the scene to show up the landscape, and then the tracks of the vehicle that's been through the snow just to help lead the eye and really drive the eye along this road into the distance. Helped also, of course, by the fence and the hedge on this side, giving us another diagonal. One of the great things about snow, of course, is it's white and it's very bright, and so that will often confuse the camera's light meter into wanting to underexpose the picture, make the picture rather darker than perhaps it ought to be, which means that any sky you've got in the picture will often come out on a really sunny day, on a bright sunny day. It will actually confuse the light meter, underexpose it, make your skies very dark. So if you've got any sort of greyish clouds scudding across as we have here, it will end up making the sky look really quite stormy, as we have here. The clouds were moving quite fast. It was quite a breezy day. Wasn't actually quite as stormy as it looks in this picture, but the clouds have been made rather dark by the light meter underexposing the picture because of the brightness of the snow. So in this kind of situation, we generally wouldn't need to use any kind of neutral density graduated filter to darken the sky in the top half of the picture like you would in summer, when the landscape would be green and the sky would be a little bit too pale. In the winter, when you've got snow on the ground, often you have the opposite problem. The ground is too bright and the sky is a little bit darker. So I have been known on occasion to actually use an ND grad filter, but upside down, to actually darken the sky. Sorry, actually darken the snow, doesn't me going into my auto talk there, actually darken the snow so that actually we end up lightening the sky a little bit without having the sky, so don't have the sky too dark. But most of the time there's no need to do that, but just go without any kind of ND grad filter and just have a nice stormy, have those clouds in the sky looking quite stormy as they scud across the scene. But anyway, here we have a wide angle view, using wide angle lens, maybe 20mm or so, looking straight into the scene, looking straight ahead. They also have a slightly different shot where you're actually more side on, perhaps just homing in on something that's really close, using wide angle lens to actually exaggerate the diagonal in this gate. So looking and have with farmland in the distance, or behind the gate anyway, and just having the gate backlit, so the sunlight is coming in from the right, and you see the shadow of the gate coming across the snow. Unfortunately, snow is not quite virgin, but really not too bad. With just a few footprints in it. Unfortunately, probably mine. Actually, I have to say, as I was trying to line up the picture, just making a mistake with the positioning of my feet. I'm always, when I'm photographing, running my courses and showing people how to take photographs on a beach, I'm always telling them, don't put your feet on the sand where you're going to take photographs. Well, I've actually made that a very elementary error myself here in the snow, and they put footprints in the snow right exactly where I want to take the picture. But nevertheless, going to ignore that and just have a really nice strong diagonal shot of this gate and looking on into the landscape in the background. And again, stormy clouds scudding across the sky here, but nevertheless with still strong sunlight. This is actually taken on Exmoor, on the western slope of Exmoor, inside Devon. A different kind of snowy picture is one where you're really completely enveloped in snow, just snow draped in the trees that are all around. It's actually quite dark. Camera, you can tell it's actually quite a slow exposure because we've got this traffic zipping by. It's unusual to want to photograph a road in a snowy situation. It's not the most attractive of scenes, but with the lights of traffic running through this woodland here, I find it was quite attractive and set up quite a strong contrast with strong red color against the white. And it's on a day when the sky was completely overcast, so the light is nice and flat, nice and even, so we don't have any sunlight breaking up the pattern in the trees and just giving it bright highlights and deep shadows. We have nice even light across all the trees, and it really is a very wintry, snowy scene. Photographed in a deep valley called Burrington Coombe in the Mendip Hills in Somerset. Mendip gets quite a lot of snow in many winters, so yeah, get some great shots like this, especially on a particularly cold days where the snow hasn't melted and fallen out of the trees. And just you have a very different scene. You've got snows on the ground, but which is melted in the trees and fallen out of the trees. It really doesn't look anything like as effective as on days where it's really very cold and the snow has stayed in the trees, and the trees are absolutely draped in snow. Then you can have some really effective snowy shots. As indeed with this next picture taken in woodland in Dorset, where the temperature is really pretty low and the snow has actually stayed in the trees and it's actually frozen on the ferns here. So we really have a very much a snow draped tree, or lots of snow draped trees, but this particular one which dominates the scene, which forms the image's main subject. We have a sort of footpath leading up through the view to lead your eye into the picture, but nevertheless the main subject is obviously this tree here, which dominates the scene and which actually obviously comes before the footpath. In fact, but that's the main composition. I should say at this point, obviously, if you're going to be photographing scenes of heavy snow, take care with your vehicle when you're trying to get to these places. We almost overdid it in this scenario. There's actually behind where I'm standing, obviously the camera's on a tripod because light levels are very low. Again, another completely overcast sky, so light levels are low, camera's on a tripod. So behind where I'm standing, or behind where the tripod is set up, there is actually a reasonably good road, but it was actually quite snowy and icy in itself. And even though we had a 4x4 with us, we actually had quite a bit of trouble pulling away from this spot after we photographed it. There was a car slipping and sliding around. We had to do a bit of digging to get the vehicle out of the snow that we parked in and get going again. We were actually on a hillside, so it was a little bit scary for a few seconds. So it does prompt me to remind people to take care when you're going out in the snowy conditions, and go well equipped. Go well equipped for the cold, with good warm weather, waterproof boots, some snacks and some water in case you get stuck, and also equipment to get yourself out of the snow. Good spade, so anything to put under the wheels to grip the ground if necessary. If you've got old Hessian sacks, which I actually have, I still have some Hessian sacks which can be very useful in the snow, or any other stuff that wheels can grip into the snow quite nicely, or then it can be very effective. But don't go out completely unequipped. Be careful to actually make sure you think ahead about think about all the things that could possibly go wrong when you go out into snowy conditions like this, and prepare and equip yourself for that. Oh, and a good rope that is strong enough to take the weight of your vehicle in case you have to be towed out by somebody else, as I have on numerous occasions, I can tell you. Anyway, so another very cold, snowy picture. This is actually taken at sea level. Very rare snowy shot at sea level in Devon. Don't get snow at sea level in Devon very often, not in South Devon anyway. This is taken at Powderham next to the estuary of the River Exe on a really cold day. The car thermometer said -7, so it was quite a chilly day to be out. So freezing fog, snow on the ground, freezing fog in the air, and giving us a really nice, very simple stripped back image of 3 trees. Threes are always good. You get yourself a nice triangle, nice simple composition. One main element, the single tree, and then the 2 trees in the background giving a backup, but softened by the fog in the distance, which helps to make sure that they don't compete for attention with the main tree in the foreground. And so just complete whiteness all around, apart from those 3 trees. White snow, white fog, everything white, and the freezing cold. Another thing to take care of if you're doing this kind of photography in not just even in snow, but in cold winter conditions, and you're using a tripod, which certainly on a day like this you will be, really wear good gloves, because the metal of a tripod gets really, really cold. I've frozen my hands so many times on the metal of a cold tripod. When I say I've frozen my hands, I don't mean that my hands have actually stuck to the tripod, but my hands have become extremely cold, and it's become very unpleasant. It actually made me feel quite ill. So really make sure that you wear good gloves when you're doing this kind of thing. You may have to take the gloves off every now and then to actually press various buttons on the camera, but in terms of actually handling everything, particularly the tripod, make sure you've got good gloves on. And then anyway, I think this is the last snowy picture, just a close-up detail, and I've taken just minutes before sunset. So you're coming in close on a few rocks and on the snow, and obviously the snow is shining in from the top of the picture, so I'm shooting in towards the light, so you really get to feel the 3-dimensionality of these curves or curves, humps and dips and valleys in the snow, so you really feel that 3-dimensional shape of the snow, and this beautiful pink color across the snow as the sun sets. Really taken just 5-10 minutes before the sun dips below the horizon, and gives you, and all the light is suddenly just gone, and you lose that color instantaneously. A detail in the snow looking into the light gives you this wonderful 3-dimensional effect of the snow, and then the beautiful color of this pink reflecting the sunlight, the pink sun from the sunlight. And then very often you have the snow sparkling in the sunlight as well, which really helps enormously. That's one more slightly snowy picture. Details coming in really close on things. This kind of thing, dead vegetation, dead plants, can be really superb for winter photography. It doesn't matter whether it's frost or snow. In this instance, it's actually snow just hanging in there in a bit of dead vegetation, taken photograph beside a road near Oakhampton on the northern edge of Dartmoor. It was a really very snowy day, but I really was taken by this particular detail of snow in a plant. Obviously, I took quite a few other pictures of landscape as well, sheep pleading to be fed in the snow as well. But this is the sort of detail that I really like, so very atmospheric and very crisp and sparkly in the snowy scene. And then finally, one more snowy ice, or not so much snowy, but icy shot, a close-up detail of frozen water, the pattern in the frozen water, and an oak leaf which had been frozen into the water as well, a few other bits and pieces. It's a slightly complex, busy shot, but I really still like it as an example of the sort of thing that you can get if you're looking down, if you're looking at your feet, looking down at the frozen ground and trying to pick out little details, little patterns here and there, whether it just be just patterns in the ice itself or patterns in combination with vegetation or any other thing for that matter, not just vegetation, anything that's been trapped in the ice and gives you these various effects. A little bit complex, as I say, but I sort of quite like it as an effect. And also very blue because of the low temperature and sort of the nature of the ice. So that's it. I've gone through it fairly quickly, but that's the kind of idea of the sort of subject matter that you might be aiming for to shoot in winter. Obviously, if you're in the thick of a winter storm, very often you have zero light. It's just, well, you still have daylight, but it's there's no interesting light. It's flat, dull light with pouring rain, strong winds, black clouds. Not really the sort of thing you want to photograph. And actually, I would also recommend that if you do want to photograph stormy seas and stormy skies along the coast, take extreme care. Don't go out at the height of a storm, certainly not on the Cornish cliffs anyway, where the winds really are incredibly high. It's quite a dangerous thing. I've done it and I've realized just how dangerous it is to be on the top of a 200 or 300 foot cliff at the height of a major gale. Best to wait until the main part of the storm has passed, and then what happens then is that not only the winds ease enough to make it relatively safely to be on the cliff, but also the clouds break up. You have rather less rain, and you also have intermittent sunshine as well in between showers. So you have some very effective sunlight coupled with showers, which might give you some rainbows, and some really very effective light on the sea, which will still be very stormy and ripped up into some fantastic waves and some superb surf. So take care. Shooting in winter, conditions are not always in your favor, but the photography that you can come out with is absolutely stunning and just absolutely fantastic. It is really one of the best seasons for photographing in, if not the best season for photographing in, provided you can make yourself comfortable and make yourself safe as well while you're doing it. So I think just the final usual roundup picture, just to remind you of my books. Christmas is coming. Like the books of the Southwest must make fantastic presents, of course, which I think I'm not at all biased. Wild Southwest, beautiful Cornwall, beautiful Devon, beautiful Somerset. Beautiful Dorset, by the way, is on its way. We're actually just mulling over designs for the front cover at the moment. The photography is finished. That is coming soon, or coming next summer, actually. It'll actually be published. And then in terms of the website itself, nigelhicks.com, well, photographs from my photos, some of my photos from all the autumn 2021 courses are now on the website. Just about all the 2022 photography workshops are listed on and detailed on the website, and booking is available. We're still just waiting for the last few details of the garden photography courses that I'm doing with at RHS Rosemore in Torrington. I still don't have the full details for that, so I'm not able to book that as yet, but everything else is bookable. And then there's the December talk coming up on the 15th of December, which will be a little bit of an experiment. I've no idea how it's going to work, but it's going to be about my own style of my image workflow on the computer after the pictures have been taken, downloading onto the computer, how I then sort of process them through the sort of captioning process, of selection process, and then the post-photography image processing process. So it will be a bit of a live demonstration for you to see, and hopefully it will be informative and useful and interesting and even enjoyable. So hopefully, if you want to come for that, then please, if you haven't already signed up, then do so. Obviously, that will be the last talk for this year. Next year's talks I haven't sort of lined up yet. What is almost certain is that I will actually decrease the frequency of the talks. The monthly talk was pretty useful during COVID times, but now everybody's getting busier and busier, me included, and I'm actually finding it quite difficult to make the time to do the preparation work that's needed for these talks, especially as some of the talks are becoming more and more involved and I need to do more preparation. So I'm going to make the talks a little less frequent, perhaps every 3 months, possibly every 2 months, but probably every 3 months. And so I shall put the first couple of talks from next year up onto the website shortly in the next couple of weeks, and then I will open up booking for those talks. But obviously, registration for December talk is open now. If you want to sign up for that, haven't already done so, then do so. And then, as usual, all the past talks are available on the website, on the blog, and on YouTube itself. So the latest one is about close-up photography, which is October's talk, and as I already said, browse and buy books. So, first workshop in 2022 is on 26th of March. It'll be low light photography, which at the moment is scheduled to be in Exmouth as usual. I may see if I can find another location. just to be a little bit different. But at the moment, it's scheduled for Exmouth, so you can sign up for that one. And sign up for all the courses apart from the RHS Rosemore courses on the website. Okay, great. So that's it. I shall unshare my screen, and then if you have any questions, please ask away. Obviously, if you want to ask a question, then just unmute your microphone and talk to me. If you want to turn your camera on as well, you can do, but that will obviously make you visible, and you'll be visible on the recording on YouTube as well. So, any questions?
May I, Nigel? Is it the same camera you use?
Is it the same camera?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, some of the older pictures, there's a few pictures, the number of pictures that were taken a few years ago would have been taken on they're all taken on Canon EOS cameras, but the older pictures would have been taken on the 5D Mark II. The more recent images now being taken on the 5D Mark IV, which is the latest model in that range. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Welcome. Hi there, Mark. Mandy.
I get the right buttons. I've got two. That's all right.
That's okay.
So, Mandy, do you want to do yours?
Yeah, could you just go through, I mean, we've done this ourselves, but if you're out in the cold, Nigel, with your camera kit, I think I read somewhere about acclimatizing your kit back to, say, the temperature of your car by putting it in a sealed plastic bag. Could you just give us a few tips on care of your camera kit when sort of shooting late at night or, you know, really cold conditions?
Yeah, obviously the cold is not kind to the cameras. I actually things have improved massively in recent years. When I first started shooting digitally back in the noughties, the batteries were absolutely dire. The batteries would die as soon as you got to below 4 degrees Celsius. And I remember doing a shoot in Sweden where I was actually in a helicopter, and the local authorities actually lent me a helicopter for an hour, and I had the embarrassing situation of practically almost all my batteries died during the helicopter ride. So I managed to revive them by putting them inside my coat and keeping the batteries warm. So if you have a problem with your batteries, which you shouldn't these days, they're much better, then the solution is to put them inside your coat, so close to your body warmth. Don't do that with the camera, because of course the camera will warm up, and if you take the camera out of your coat, then the lenses will mist up. And you're quite right, you're going to have the same kind of problem in getting in and out of a warm car. Obviously, the obvious solution is to not heat your car, of course, but that can be fairly unbearable. So I don't really have a solution. Obviously, you can put your kit inside a bag when you get into the car, but if the bag is at the same temperature as the car, it really isn't going to make any difference. The bag has got to be cold too, but that's going to heat up at the same speed as the camera will. So the solutions really, well, actually I suppose my solution really is actually always have the camera in the boot rather than in the car itself. I have a hatchback, which so the heat from the car will nevertheless get into the boot, but it still takes a lot longer, and the boot is nevertheless, even in a hatchback, is a lot colder than the main part of the car, so that will help. It's always tempting to have the car in the camera with you, because you can just grab it and jump out of the car quickly, especially if you're doing wildlife and you see some interesting wildlife while you're driving. But in terms of keeping it cold, keeping the camera cold once it's got to a cold temperature, then I think keeping it in the boot of the car is a better solution. And so putting it in a plastic bag is going to work for a few minutes, but the black bag is going to warm up as well, so it's not necessarily going to help you a great deal. It may help to keep condensation off the front of the lens, but it's still, if you've got to take the camera out of the plastic bag at some point, and if the camera and the bag are warm, then you're still going to get condensation on the front of the lens. There's no real good solution. Not suffered too badly with condensation in recent years of getting the camera in and out of the car. I think I tend to be fairly mean with the heating, so I keep the heating quite low and keep the camera in the boot, and that tends to work.
I think that's what we did. We just didn't put the heater in.
I think that's what you end up doing quite a lot, is just keep the car down to the lowest temperature that you can bear and have the camera in the boot which is going to be colder than the main part of the car, even on a hatch, even in a hatchback. But yeah, I mean, I've had plenty of trouble with that in tropical countries where I've had the air conditioning too cold in my room, and then I've stepped out into the humidity of the street. Primarily in Singapore, I've had it multiple times, and then I've paid the price of having to sit around for 20 minutes while the condensation clears from the lenses. But I've had that in the Eden project in Cornwall too. But anyway, in tropical countries, again, don't have your air conditioning too strong. Just have the temperature as high as you can bear it. Yeah. And your other question, sorry, I've waffled on too long.
The other question, Nigel, you actually answered in your conversation, which was about batteries and keeping them warm. Okay.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Generally not a problem these days until you're down to well below zero. But yeah, obviously, if you go down to -10, then I think you're probably going to start to encounter the same problem. But yeah, just keep the batteries inside your clothes. Even if you have to take the battery out of the camera that you're using, put it inside your clothing as well if necessary. But certainly your spare batteries, keep them close to you and keep warm. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Nigel.
At least we don't have the problem we used to have in the days of film when the temperature went down to -20 or thereabouts. The film would become extremely brittle, and when the motor drive on the camera would wind the film on, the film would snap. So at least we don't have that problem anymore. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, Nigel. If it's Mike Burrows.
Mike.
I like lots of them, but I particularly like the one of the cars going around the lane in the snow.
Okay,
What intrigued me was how the brake lights were there, but the car itself sort of vanished.
Yeah.
What sort of exposure did you have?
I can't really remember offhand. I haven't written it down here either, which I normally do, but I'm guessing it's probably about 3 seconds or so. I would say 3 or 4 seconds probably.
Right.
I don't think cars were going particularly fast because it was a little bit icy, so I think it's 3 or 4 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah. Any more questions? I'm just looking at some of you have written some comments in the chat, so I'm just looking at that there. Any more questions? Another message from Mike. Thanks, Mike. That's all great. Yeah. Any more questions? If not, I'll sort of wind the meeting up and say thanks for coming along. There's one more question or not? No. No. Okay, well, I'm going to wind up the meeting and say thanks for coming, and hopefully I'll see you all in December, and happy Christmas shopping. Better start that soon and think about that. Anyway, we'll see you in December. Back a little bit of a break from all that, and we'll talk about my post-photography processing in the December talk. And meanwhile, have a great month and get that camera out and do some winter photography. Well, we're still in autumn, but do some late autumn, early winter photography. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you very much. I'll end the talk here. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Nigel.